The altimeter read 40,000 feet when Captain Maya Chen felt her world tilt sideways. Not the aircraft, her vision. The F-15E Strike Eagle she was piloting held steady through the crystalline air above the Pacific, but inside the cockpit, something was catastrophically wrong with her weapons systems officer. Viper 2-1, say status, crackled through her helmet from the AWACS controller somewhere far below. Maya glanced at her rear-view mirror, a small convex piece mounted on the canopy frame, and her heart dropped into her stomach. Lieutenant Jake Morrison's helmet was tilted at an unnatural angle, his oxygen mask fogged but not clearing with regular breaths. His hands, usually dancing across the weapons systems panel with practiced precision, hung limp against his harness straps. Viper 2-1, possible medical emergency, Maya transmitted, her voice steady despite the adrenaline spike that made her fingertips tingle. WSO appears unconscious. Requesting priority vectors back to Elmendorf. They were 280 miles out over the Pacific, running a routine intercept training exercise with 2 other F-15s and a quartet of F-22 Raptors from Joint Base Elmendorf-Richardson in Alaska. It was supposed to be a standard Tuesday afternoon, practice intercepts, some basic fighter maneuvers, then back to base for debrief and the perpetual paperwork that came with every flight. Instead, Maya was now flying a $30 million fighter jet with an incapacitated crew member, over open ocean, in weather that was starting to deteriorate along the coast. Viper 2-1, copy medical emergency. Stand by for vectors. What's your fuel state? Maya's eyes flicked to the fuel gauge. 11,000 pounds. Approximately 45 minutes to bingo fuel. 45 minutes to reach the minimum fuel required to land safely. But Elmendorf was 38 minutes away at cruise speed, and she'd need to slow down for the approach and landing. The math was tight. Too tight. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Behind her, Jake hadn't moved. Maya tried the intercom. Jake. Jake, can you hear me? Morrison, respond. Silence except for the constant roar of the twin Pratt and Whitney engines. Her mind raced through the possibilities. Hypoxia? GLOC? Medical event? They hadn't pulled any significant G-forces during the exercise. The oxygen system indicators all showed green. But something had taken him out of the fight, and she was now effectively flying solo in an aircraft designed for 2. Viper flight, Viper 2-1, she called to her wingmen. I'm declaring an emergency and breaking off. Continue exercise without me. Viper 2-1, Viper 2-3. We're coming with you. That was Captain Steve Rattler Patterson, her flight lead for today's exercise. Viper 2-2, take the flight back to the merge point and continue with the Raptors. 2-2, copy. Maya began a gentle turn back toward the Alaskan coast, keeping her movements smooth. The last thing she needed was to compound the emergency by putting Jake through unnecessary G-forces if he was having a medical crisis. Patterson's F-15 slid into formation off her right wing, close enough that she could see him looking across the gap between their aircraft. His voice came through, more personal on their discrete frequency. Maya, what do you need? I need Jake to wake up, she said, more emotion bleeding through than she intended. I need him to be okay. He's tough. What's your plan? Straight shot to Elmendorf. I'll need the runway cleared, ambulance standing by. If he's hypoxic and I descend too fast, the pressure change could make it worse. But if I don't descend, we're burning fuel we don't have. It was the kind of decision they trained for in simulators but prayed never to face in reality. Every choice carried risk. Every second mattered. The AWACS controller came back on frequency. Viper 2-1, Elmendorf Tower has declared emergency services standing by. Weather is deteriorating, visibility dropping to 3 miles in snow. Field is currently IFR. Winds 270 at 22, gusting to 31. Instrument flight rules. Poor visibility. Gusty crosswinds. And she'd be flying an approach to one of the most challenging runways in the Air Force while worried about her unconscious backseater. Maya felt the weight of her wings, the silver bars she'd earned 4 years ago after fighting through every obstacle the Air Force could throw at a woman who wanted to fly fighters. She'd proven herself in the skies over Syria, flying close air support missions where a single mistake meant friendly forces died. She'd landed on a foam-covered runway when her landing gear wouldn't extend over Nevada. She'd made split-second decisions in the chaos of combat. But this felt different. This wasn't enemy fire or mechanical failure. This was Jake, the same Jake who'd been her WSO for 18 months, who knew her flying style better than anyone, who'd saved their lives twice with his quick thinking and steady hands on the weapon systems. The same Jake who'd helped her move into her new apartment last month and refused to leave until he'd assembled every piece of IKEA furniture she'd bought. Viper 2-1, say your intentions, the controller asked. Maya checked her instruments one more time, calculated the descent profile in her head, and made her decision. Viper 2-1 is beginning descent. I'm bringing him home. The descent through 35,000 feet was smooth, but Maya's mind was anything but calm. She'd pulled up the emergency checklist on her kneeboard, the laminated card that covered crew member incapacitation, but the procedures assumed the conscious pilot could communicate with the unconscious one. They assumed you could check for breathing, assess responsiveness, potentially help manage their oxygen system. From the front seat of an F-15E, with a crew member behind her, Maya could do none of those things. Jake, if you can hear me, squeeze the stick. The flight controls in an F-15 were linked. If Jake had the strength to grip the control stick in the rear cockpit, she'd feel it in hers. Come on, Morrison. Give me something. Nothing. She tried a different approach. Jake, you still owe me $50 from last week's poker game. I'm not letting you check out before you pay up. Still nothing. The joke fell flat in the empty air between them, and Maya felt her throat tighten. She swallowed hard and forced herself to focus on the tasks at hand. Through 30,000 feet, the weather became visible below, a solid deck of gray clouds rolling in from the Pacific, exactly what the meteorologists had predicted but arriving earlier than expected. The snow would make the approach more challenging, but Elmendorf had excellent instrument landing systems. She'd make it work. Viper 2-1, Elmendorf approach. Radar contact. We have you 78 miles southeast at flight level 285, descending. Cleared direct to Elmendorf Ver, expect ILS runway 5. Emergency equipment is standing by. Viper 2-1, cleared direct, expect ILS 5, Maya acknowledged, already programming the navigation into her flight computer. Her hands moved through the familiar motions, throttle adjustments, heading corrections, constant scan of the instruments, but her mind kept returning to the mirror and the motionless figure behind her. Patterson's voice cut through her thoughts. Maya, fuel check. She glanced at the gauge. 9,000 pounds. I'm showing 9,500. You're burning more than you should be. He was right. The fuel flow was slightly higher than optimal. In her focus on Jake and the approach, she'd let her speed creep up, the engines working harder than necessary. It was a rookie mistake, and Maya felt a flash of anger at herself. Viper 2-1, correcting. She eased the throttles back, watching the fuel flow decrease. Every pound of JP-8 jet fuel mattered now. At 20,000 feet, she tried one more time. Jake. Jake Morrison. I need you to wake up. We're going to be on the ground in 15 minutes, but I need to know you're still with me. The lack of response felt like a physical weight pressing down on her chest. She'd lost people before, friends who hadn't come back from missions, pilots she'd trained with who'd been killed in crashes or combat. But never like this. Never where she was the only thing standing between them and the ground, unable to help, unable to even know if they were alive. Through the clouds at 12,000 feet, the visibility dropped to almost nothing. Maya was on instruments now, flying by the gauges and displays, trusting technology and training while the world outside turned into a gray void. Patterson stayed with her, his F-15 a reassuring presence on her wing even though she could barely see him through the snow. Viper 2-1, Elmendorf approach. Turn left heading 350, descend to 6,000. You're 8 miles from Jelly, cleared ILS runway 5 approach. Viper 2-1, left 350, descending to 6,000, cleared ILS 5. The instrument landing system needles came alive on her display, one for lateral guidance, one for vertical. Maya flew them precisely, making tiny corrections, keeping the needles centered as she descended through the murk. The landing gear warning horn sounded at 1,500 feet above the ground, and she reached down to drop the gear without taking her eyes off the instruments. 3 green lights confirmed the gear was down and locked. One less thing to worry about. Gears down, 3 green, she reported. Viper 2-1, contact tower. Maya switched frequencies. Elmendorf Tower, Viper 2-1, ILS runway 5 with you, 3 green, emergency declared. Viper 2-1, Elmendorf Tower, winds 270 at 25 gusting 33, cleared to land runway 5. Emergency equipment is in position. Through the snow at 500 feet, Maya caught her first glimpse of the runway lights, twin rows of white stretching out ahead, with the approach lighting system glowing red and white through the precipitation. The crosswind pushed against the aircraft, and she dipped the right wing into it, using rudder to keep the nose aligned with the runway centerline. This was called a crab approach, and it required constant adjustment, constant attention. The wind wasn't steady, it gusted and shifted, trying to push her off course. Maya made correction after correction, her right hand on the stick making tiny movements, her feet dancing on the rudder pedals. 200 feet, she counted off for herself. 100. 50. The main wheels kissed the concrete with barely a chirp, a testament to muscle memory and thousands of hours of practice. Maya deployed the drag chute, felt it blossom behind the aircraft and pull them straight despite the crosswind. The speed bled off quickly, 150 knots, 120, 100. Viper 2-1, safely on deck, she reported, her voice professionally calm despite the relief flooding through her. Copy, 2-1. Exit at taxiway Delta, hold short. Emergency vehicles are approaching. Maya brought the F-15 to a complete stop on the taxiway, away from the active runway. Through the canopy, she could see the flashing lights of emergency vehicles racing toward her position, fire trucks, an ambulance, a cluster of support vehicles. She ran through the shutdown checklist with practiced efficiency, throttling back the engines, but left them running for now. The maintenance crews would handle the full shutdown once Jake was out. She tried one more time. Jake. We're on the ground. You're going to be okay. No response. Maya unstrapped herself as quickly as her shaking hands would allow, then reached up and pulled the canopy release. The clear bubble began to rise, and a blast of cold Alaskan air filled the cockpit, carrying with it the smell of jet fuel and wet tarmac. 2 paramedics were already scrambling up the crew ladder that ground crew had positioned against the aircraft. Maya twisted in her seat to look back at Jake. His helmet was still tilted, his body slack in the harness. But as the paramedics reached him and one pressed fingers against his neck, the man nodded. I've got a pulse. Strong and steady. The relief was so intense that Maya felt her vision blur. She blinked hard, refusing to let the tears fall, not here, not now. She was still Captain Maya Chen, fighter pilot, and fighter pilots didn't cry in front of the enlisted crews. Ma'am, we need you to exit the aircraft, one of the ground crew called up to her. We've got him. Maya nodded and climbed out of the front cockpit, her legs unsteady as she descended the ladder. The ground felt strange under her boots, solid and still after hours of constant motion in the sky. She walked around to the rear of the aircraft, where the paramedics were carefully extracting Jake from the rear cockpit, moving his head and neck with extreme caution in case there was a spinal injury. Colonel Sarah Bridges, the squadron commander, appeared at Maya's side. She was a tall woman with silver threading through her dark hair, her flight suit bearing the patches of 2 wars and more flying hours than most pilots would accumulate in a career. Captain Chen. That was some impressive flying. Thank you, ma'am. But Jake. They'll take care of him. Right now, I need you to walk me through what happened. From the beginning. Maya took a breath and began the report, keeping her voice steady and professional as she described the flight, the moment she'd noticed Jake's condition, the decisions she'd made on the way back. It was easier to be clinical about it, to treat it like any other debrief rather than acknowledge how terrified she'd been. The paramedics loaded Jake onto a stretcher and into the waiting ambulance. As the doors closed, Maya caught a glimpse of them placing an oxygen mask over his face, saw one of them starting in 4-line. Then the ambulance was racing away toward the base hospital, its siren wailing through the snow. Preliminary assessment is hypoxia, Colonel Bridges said, reading something on her tablet. But they won't know for sure until they get him to the hospital and run tests. Could be equipment malfunction, could be medical condition we didn't know about. We'll figure it out. I want to go to the hospital. You will. But first, we need to download your flight data and get your statement while it's fresh. It won't take long. The colonel's voice softened slightly. You did everything right, Maya. You brought him home alive. That's what matters. But as Maya walked with the colonel toward the operations building, she couldn't shake the image of Jake's motionless form in that mirror. She'd brought him home, yes, but she still didn't know if she'd been fast enough. If her decisions had been the right ones. If she'd missed something she should have seen. Inside operations, the intelligence shop had already pulled the flight data from the aircraft's recorder. Maya sat in a small briefing room, still in her sweat-soaked flight suit, and walked through the mission timeline minute by minute. The data showed Jake's oxygen system had been functioning normally. His physiological monitoring system, the sensors that tracked heart rate and breathing, had recorded the moment everything went wrong, a sudden change in heart rhythm, followed by loss of consciousness. Cardiac event, the flight surgeon said, pointing at the data on the screen. Not hypoxia. His heart went into an abnormal rhythm. Will he be okay? Maya asked, not caring that her voice cracked on the question. Too early to say. But the fact that he had a pulse when you landed is a good sign. If his heart had stopped completely. The flight surgeon trailed off, leaving the implications hanging in the air. The debrief lasted 90 minutes, though it felt both longer and shorter to Maya. When they finally released her, she borrowed a car from the motor pool and drove through the snow to the base hospital. The roads were slick and visibility was poor, but after flying an emergency approach in worse conditions, driving seemed almost easy. At the hospital, a nurse directed her to the cardiac care unit on the 3rd floor. She found Jake's room and stopped in the doorway, her breath catching in her throat. He was awake. Pale and hooked up to more monitors than seemed necessary, but conscious and alive and looking at her with exhausted brown eyes. Hey, Captain, he said, his voice rough. Did you land my airplane without scratching the paint? Maya felt something break loose in her chest, tension she'd been holding since the moment she'd seen Jake's helmet tilt in that mirror. She crossed the room in 3 strides and grabbed his hand, not caring about protocol or professionalism or the fact that 2 nurses were adjusting 4 lines on the other side of his bed. You absolute idiot, she said, her voice thick. You scared the hell out of me. Jake managed a weak smile. Sorry about that. Wasn't exactly on my agenda either. He squeezed her hand with what little strength he had. But I heard you. The whole way down. Every word you said. You heard me? Maya stared at him. You couldn't respond? Couldn't move? Couldn't talk? But I could hear. His eyes held hers. I heard you telling me to wake up. Heard you joking about the poker money. Heard you promising to bring me home. His voice dropped lower. You kept me from panicking, Maya. I knew if anyone could get us down safely, it was you. One of the nurses, a lieutenant commander with kind eyes, cleared her throat gently. Captain Chen, Lieutenant Morrison needs rest, but the doctor said you could stay for a few minutes. He's stable, but he had a serious cardiac arrhythmia at altitude. We've got him on medication to regulate his heart rhythm now. Maya nodded, not letting go of Jake's hand. What caused it? We're still running tests, the nurse said. Could be a congenital condition that's never shown symptoms before. High altitude, low oxygen, partial pressure, the stress of flying, all of that can trigger things that would never surface at sea level. The cardiologist will know more in the morning. Jake's eyes were already starting to drift closed, the exhaustion and medication pulling him towards sleep. Maya squeezed his hand once more. I'll be back tomorrow. You rest. Maya? His eyes opened briefly. Thank you. For everything. That's what pilots do, she said softly. We bring our crew home. She stayed until she was certain he was asleep, then walked out into the hospital corridor. The adrenaline that had kept her sharp and focused for the past 3 hours was finally wearing off, leaving her feeling hollow and shaky. She made it to the stairwell before her knees gave out, and she sat down hard on the concrete steps, her head in her hands. That was where Colonel Bridges found her 15 minutes later. I figured you'd be here, the colonel said, sitting down beside Maya on the cold stairs. She handed over a bottle of water. Drink. You're probably dehydrated. Maya took the water and drank half of it in one go, not realizing how thirsty she was until the cool liquid hit her throat. He's going to be okay, she said, more to convince herself than inform the colonel. I know. I called the hospital before I came. They're optimistic. Bridges was quiet for a moment, then added, You know what you did today, right? The significance of it? I landed a plane with an emergency. That's the job. You did more than that. The colonel's voice was firm. You stayed calm under pressure that would have broken lesser pilots. You made the right calls at every decision point. You flew a perfect approach in terrible weather with a critically ill crew member you couldn't help. And you brought him home alive. She paused. There are going to be questions about whether you should have descended faster, whether you should have declared an emergency sooner, whether every choice you made was optimal. That's how the system works. But I want you to know, right now, before any of that starts, you saved his life today, Maya. Maya felt her throat tighten again. I was so scared I'd get it wrong. That I'd make a mistake and lose him. Fear doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. Bridges stood and offered Maya a hand up. Come on. I'm taking you home. You're grounded for 72 hours while we investigate the incident, which means you can actually sleep like a normal person for once. They walked out to the parking lot together, the snow still falling steadily. Maya looked up at the sky, gray and overcast, completely different from the crystal clear blue she'd been flying through when this had all started. It felt like a lifetime ago. Colonel? Maya said as they reached the car. What happens to Jake? His flying career? Bridges's expression turned serious. Too early to say. If it's a fixable condition, maybe he flies again. If it's not. She shook her head. Let's focus on getting him healthy first. The career questions can wait. But Maya knew how this worked. Cardiac conditions were almost always disqualifying for flight status. Even if Jake recovered completely, even if medication controlled the arrhythmia perfectly, the Air Force wouldn't risk putting him back in a cockpit at 40,000 feet. His career as a weapons systems officer was probably over, ended by a malfunction of his own heart that he'd had no control over and no way to prevent. It wasn't fair. But then again, very little about military aviation was fair. You could be the best pilot in the world and still have your career ended by something completely beyond your control, a medical condition, a training accident, a bureaucratic decision made in a Pentagon office by people who'd never sat in a cockpit. The drive to Maya's off-base apartment took 20 minutes through the snow. Bridges pulled up to the building and left the engine running. Get some sleep. That's an order. I'll send someone for you if anything changes with Morrison. Yes, ma'am. And Colonel? Thank you. Thank me by taking care of yourself. You're no good to your crew if you run yourself into the ground. Maya's apartment was exactly as she'd left it that morning, coffee cup in the sink, bed unmade, flight suit from yesterday's mission draped over the back of a chair. It seemed impossible that only 12 hours had passed since she'd walked out the door expecting a routine training flight. The person who'd left this apartment that morning felt like a stranger now. She stood under the shower for 30 minutes, letting the hot water wash away the sweat and tension, though it couldn't touch the knot of worry still lodged in her chest. When she finally forced herself out, she checked her phone and found 17 text messages. Most were from squadron mates who'd heard about the emergency landing. Simple messages, "You okay?" And heard about Morrison. "Let me know if you need anything." Patterson had sent 3 texts, progressively more concerned when she hadn't responded, the last one simply, "Maya, check in." She sent a group text, "I'm fine. Jake's stable. Thanks everyone." One message stood out from the others. It was from her father, a retired Air Force colonel who'd flown F-4 Phantoms in Vietnam and F-15s in Desert Storm. He'd been her inspiration for joining the Air Force, though their relationship had been complicated by his initial resistance to her becoming a fighter pilot. He'd come around eventually, but the memory of those early arguments still stung. The text was characteristically brief. "Heard about your emergency. Well done. Call when you can." Maya stared at the message for a long moment, then set the phone down without responding. She wasn't ready to talk about it yet, not even to her father. Maybe especially not to her father, who would analyze every decision she'd made with the clinical precision of someone who'd spent 40 years in the cockpit. She forced herself to eat something, leftover pizza from the fridge that tasted like cardboard, and tried to sleep. But every time she closed her eyes, she was back in that cockpit, watching Jake's motionless form in the mirror, feeling the weight of responsibility pressing down on her like physical force. At 0300, she gave up on sleep and made coffee. She sat at her small kitchen table, laptop open, and started writing her official incident report. The Air Force would want every detail documented while it was fresh. She described the flight profile, the moment she'd noticed Jake's condition, each decision point and the reasoning behind it. The writing was mechanical, clinical, stripped of all emotion. That was how reports were supposed to be. But when she got to the part about Jake telling her he'd heard everything she'd said, Maya's fingers stilled on the keyboard. She couldn't put that in an official report. It was too personal, too raw. Instead, she wrote, "Crew coordination was maintained throughout the emergency to the extent possible given WSO's incapacitation. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us." Now back to the story. By 0600, she'd finished the report and emailed it to Colonel Bridges. She showered again, put on her uniform, and drove back to the hospital through the pre-dawn darkness. The roads were better now, the snow had stopped and the plows had been through, but Maya barely noticed. Her mind was already at the hospital, wondering if Jake had made it through the night without complications. She found him awake, sitting up slightly in bed, looking better than he had the night before. The color had returned to his face, and though he was still connected to a nest of monitors, he seemed more alert. "You're not supposed to be here," he said when he saw her in the doorway. "Aren't you grounded?" "Grounded from flying, not from visiting sick friends." Maya pulled a chair close to his bed. "How are you feeling?" "Like I got hit by a truck, but apparently that's normal after your heart decides to do the cha-cha at 40,000 feet. He tried for his usual humor, but Maya could see the fear underneath it. "They're saying I might not fly again." There it was. The thing they'd both been thinking but neither had wanted to say out loud. "They don't know that for sure yet," Maya said, even though she knew she was offering false hope. "Don't." Jake's voice was gentle but firm. "Don't do that. We've always been straight with each other." He looked down at his hands. The cardiologist was pretty clear. "Even if the medication works perfectly, even if I never have another episode, the Air Force won't clear me for flight status. Too much risk." Maya felt anger flare hot in her chest, anger at the unfairness of it, at a system that could take away someone's dream because of a condition they couldn't control. "So what happens now?" "Med board, probably. Discharge or reassignment to a ground job." Jake's voice was carefully neutral, but Maya could hear the devastation underneath. It's over, Maya. 15 months as your WSO, and it's just over. She reached out and took his hand again. You're one of the best WSOs I've ever flown with. That doesn't change just because you can't fly anymore. Feels like it does. He was quiet for a moment. You know what the worst part is? I love flying. But what I really love is being your backseater. We're a good team. We're a good team. He corrected himself, and the past tense landed like a physical blow. Maya squeezed his hand. You'll always be my WSO, Jake. Even if they ground you, even if you end up behind a desk somewhere, you'll always be the guy who had my 6. A nurse came in to check Jake's vitals, and Maya stepped out to give them privacy. In the hallway, she found Colonel Bridges waiting, 2 cups of coffee in hand. Figured you'd show up early, the colonel said, handing one to Maya. How's he doing? Physically? Better. Emotionally? Maya shook her head. He knows his flying career is over. Colonel Bridges leaned against the wall, her expression thoughtful. The timing on this is unfortunate. We've got Red Flag coming up in 3 weeks. Red Flag. The premier air combat training exercise, held at Nellis Air Force Base in Nevada. It was where the Air Force's best pilots went to train against realistic threats in complex scenarios. Maya's squadron had been scheduled to participate, and she'd been looking forward to it for months. I'll find another WSO, Maya said, though the words felt like betrayal. Actually, I wanted to talk to you about that. Bridges took a sip of her coffee. Higher headquarters has been watching your career, Maya. Yesterday's performance only reinforced what they already knew. You're an exceptional pilot. They want to send you to the weapons school. Maya's heart skipped. The USAF Weapons School was the Air Force equivalent of Top Gun, an intensive 6-month course that took the best pilots and turned them into tactical experts and instructors. It was the career milestone every fighter pilot dreamed of, and the graduation patch was one of the most respected symbols in military aviation. I'm honored, ma'am, but you feel guilty about leaving while Morrison is dealing with this, Bridges finished. I get it. But Maya, this is your career. This is what you've been working toward. And honestly, Jake would be furious if you turned it down because of him. He's my WSO. My responsibility. He was your WSO. And he's going to be fine, just not in the cockpit. Bridges's voice was firm but not unkind. You did your job yesterday. You brought him home alive. That's where your responsibility ended. What happens next in his career isn't on you. Maya stared down at the coffee cup in her hands. She knew the colonel was right. She knew Jake would tell her the same thing. But it still felt wrong to be getting opportunities while his world was falling apart. The class starts in 2 months, Bridges continued. You'd need to spend the next 8 weeks getting up to speed with a new WSO, running through advanced tactics, and completing the pre-course requirements. It'll be the hardest thing you've ever done. But I think you're ready. Who would be my new WSO? I have a few candidates in mind. There's Captain Lisa Torres, she just finished the B course and she's top of her class. Or Major Kevin Grant from the 90th, he's got combat experience and excellent reviews. Both have expressed interest in flying with you. Both were good choices. Maya knew Torres slightly, a sharp officer with a reputation for precision and calm under pressure. Grant she'd met once at a conference, he'd seemed competent and professional. Either one would be perfectly capable. But neither one was Jake. Can I think about it? Maya asked. You have 24 hours. After that, I need to know so I can start the paperwork. Bridges pushed off from the wall. And Maya? This isn't a betrayal. This is you continuing to be the exceptional officer you've always been. Jake will understand that. Eventually, you will too. The colonel walked away, leaving Maya alone in the hallway with her thoughts and her coffee. Through the window in Jake's door, she could see him talking with the nurse, managing a smile despite everything. He was strong. He'd get through this. But would their friendship survive it? Would he be able to watch her continue the career he'd lost? Would she be able to fly with someone else and not feel like she was replacing him? Maya's phone buzzed. A text from Patterson, heard about weapons school. Congrats. You deserve it. Word traveled fast in the fighter community. She hadn't even decided yet, and people already knew. The pressure to say yes was mounting, from her squadron, from higher headquarters, from the trajectory of her career that had been building toward this moment since she'd first put on the uniform. She went back into Jake's room. The nurse had left, and he was adjusting his bed to sit up straighter. When he saw Maya's expression, his smile faded. What's wrong? Bridges offered me a slot at weapons school. For a moment, Jake's face went completely blank. Then, slowly, he smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes. Maya, that's incredible. When do you start? I haven't said yes yet. Why the hell not? He stared at her like she'd lost her mind. This is weapons school. Do you know how many pilots would kill for that opportunity? You just found out your flying career is over, and I'm supposed to celebrate getting mine advanced? Yes, Jake said firmly. That's exactly what you're supposed to do. My situation sucks, and I'm going to need time to deal with it. But that has nothing to do with you. You earned this, Maya. You earned it with every flight, every mission, every decision you've made. Including yesterday. It feels wrong. It feels wrong because you're a good person and a good friend. Jake's voice softened. But I need you to listen to me. If you turn this down because of me, I will never forgive myself. Do you understand? Never. This is your moment. Take it. Maya felt tears threatening again and blinked them back hard. Who's going to fly with you when you get better? I'm not getting better, remember? No more flying. He said it matter-of-factly, though Maya could hear the pain underneath. But I'll figure something out. Maybe I'll become an instructor, torture young WSOs with impossible scenarios. Maybe I'll get a desk job and slowly lose my mind pushing paperwork. But whatever I do, it'll be easier knowing that you're out there being the badass pilot you were always meant to be. I'm going to miss flying with you. I'm going to miss it too. Jake reached out and squeezed her hand. But this isn't the end of our friendship, Maya. It's just a different chapter. Maya left the hospital 2 hours later, her mind made up. She called Colonel Bridges from the parking lot, standing in the cold morning air, her breath misting in front of her face. I'll do it, she said when the colonel answered. I'll take the weapons school slot. Good choice, Captain. Report to my office at 0800 tomorrow. We've got a lot of work to do before you ship out to Nellis. The next 8 weeks blurred together in a haze of intense preparation. Maya flew every day, sometimes twice a day, getting comfortable with her new WSO, Captain Lisa Torres, who turned out to be even better than her reputation suggested. Torres was precise, analytical, and unflappable. She wasn't Jake, but she was damn good at her job. They ran through advanced tactical scenarios, practiced emergencies until they could handle them in their sleep, and studied the academic material that would form the foundation of the weapons school curriculum. Maya barely had time to think, which was probably for the best. When she did have a moment to herself, her thoughts inevitably drifted to Jake. He'd been medically retired from flying status, as expected, and reassigned to a training position at the squadron. He helped develop syllabus materials and ran simulator sessions, and he did it with the same dedication he'd brought to flying. But Maya could see the loss in his eyes whenever a flight took off without him. She could hear it in his voice when he asked about her training, trying to be happy for her while his own dreams lay in ruins. They stayed friends, but it was different now. The easy camaraderie they'd shared in the cockpit didn't quite translate to the ground. There was a distance between them that hadn't been there before, not from lack of trying, but from the simple fact that her life was moving forward while his had been forced onto a different path. The day before Maya was scheduled to leave for Nellis, Jake met her at her apartment to help her pack. He'd insisted, despite her protests, that she could handle it herself. You helped me move in, she said, stuffing flight suits into a duffel bag. Seems only fair I help you move out for this adventure. It's 6 months, not a deployment. 6 months at weapons school might as well be a deployment. You're going to be so busy you won't know what day it is. He folded a t-shirt with military precision and added it to her bag. My advice? Sleep whenever you can. Eat whenever you can. And don't be afraid to ask questions. The instructors there are brutal, but they want you to succeed. You sound like you've been researching. I have. Jake met her eyes. Just because I can't go doesn't mean I can't help you prepare. I want you to crush this, Maya. I want you to come back with that patch and be the best damn instructor pilot this squadron has ever seen. Maya stopped packing and crossed the room to hug him. He stiffened for just a moment, they'd never been particularly physically affectionate, then wrapped his arms around her and held on tight. I'm sorry, she said quietly. I'm sorry this happened to you. Me too. But I'm not sorry you're getting this opportunity. Don't ever think that. He pulled back and looked at her seriously. Promise me something? Anything. Promise me you'll give this everything you've got. No holding back because you feel guilty about me. No second guessing yourself. Just fly like you did that day, like you always do. Like you're the best pilot in the sky, because you are. I promise. The next morning, Maya boarded a C-130 transport to Nellis Air Force Base in Nevada. The weapons school course started with 2 weeks of academics, intense classroom instruction on tactics, weapons systems, threat analysis, and mission planning. Maya studied 18 hours a day, her brain absorbing information like a sponge while simultaneously feeling like it might explode from the sheer volume of material. Then came the flying portion, and that's when things got really intense. The weapons school didn't just teach you to fly. It taught you to think like a tactical expert, to see 3 moves ahead like a chess master, to lead complex missions with multiple aircraft types against sophisticated threats. Every flight was graded. Every mistake was analyzed in excruciating detail during debriefs that could last hours. Maya flew against the most advanced threat simulation systems in the world. She led 4 ship formations against integrated air defense networks. She planned and executed strikes against heavily defended targets. And through it all, Torres was right there with her, learning the WSO curriculum while Maya learned the pilot side. They failed missions. Everyone did, that was part of the learning process. The difference was how you responded to failure. Maya took each setback, analyzed what went wrong, and came back stronger the next day. She asked questions when she didn't understand something. She stayed late to review tape of her flights. She pushed herself harder than she'd ever pushed before. 3 months in, during a particularly complex mission where Maya was leading an 8-ship strike package against a simulated enemy command center, everything came together. She saw the battlefield with crystal clarity, where the threats were, where the opportunities existed, how to maneuver her formation to achieve surprise and maximize effect while minimizing risk. Viper lead is pushing to the target, she called over the radio, her voice calm and confident. All flights, execute on my mark. 3, 2, 1, mark. 8 aircraft rolled in on the target in perfect sequence, weapons off target, defensive systems defeating the simulated surface-to-air missiles. It was textbook execution, the kind of mission that made instructors nod in approval. In the debrief afterward, the instructor pilot, a seasoned major with more combat time than most pilots would see in a career, looked at Maya with something approaching respect. That, he said, is how it's done. Good kill, Captain Chen. It was the first unreserved compliment Maya had received in 3 months, and it felt like victory. But the weapons school wasn't done testing her yet. The final exercise came in month 5, a massive red flag mission that would test everything she'd learned. Maya would be leading a strike package of 16 aircraft from multiple services, Air Force F-15s and F-16s, Navy F divided by a -18s, even a pair of Marine Corps F-35s. They'd be going up against the most realistic threat simulation the U.S. military could create, complete with adversary aircraft flown by expert pilots whose entire job was to shoot down the good guys. The mission planning took 3 days. Maya and her fellow students pored over intelligence reports, mapped out threat locations, calculated fuel requirements, and developed contingency plans for every scenario they could imagine. They barely slept, running on coffee and adrenaline and the knowledge that this was their final examination. Torres was invaluable during the planning process. While Maya focused on the big picture, the overall mission flow and timeline, Torres dove into the details of weapons employment, defensive systems, and communications architecture. They worked as a seamless team, anticipating each other's needs, filling in gaps in the plan before they became problems. The night before the mission, Maya called Jake. It was late in Alaska, but she knew he'd still be awake. He always had trouble sleeping. "Hey," he said when he answered, his voice warm with surprise. "Shouldn't you be sleeping before your big final?" "Probably. But I wanted to hear a friendly voice." Maya was sitting on her bunk in the bachelor officer quarters, her flight suit for tomorrow already laid out, her checklist memorized. "How are things back home?" "Same as always. I ran the morning simulator session for the new lieutenants. One of them managed to crash on takeoff, which I didn't think was even possible in the sim." He laughed, but it sounded hollow. "Living the dream over here." Maya heard what he wasn't saying, that he missed flying, that sitting in a simulator while others went up was slowly killing him, that every day without a cockpit felt like a day wasted. But they'd had that conversation before, and there was nothing new to say. "I wish you could be here tomorrow," she said instead. "In the back seat where you belong. Torres is good, though, right?" "She's excellent. But she's not you." Jake was quiet for a moment. "Maya, you know I love you like a sister, right? So I'm going to say this as someone who cares about you, you need to let me go." "What?" "Not as a friend. We'll always be friends. But you need to let go of the guilt about me not being there. You need to fly that mission tomorrow without wondering what I would have done, or whether Torres measures up, or whether you somehow betrayed me by moving forward with your career." His voice was gentle but firm. "I'm not in that cockpit anymore. Torres is. She's your WSO now. Trust her the way you used to trust me." Maya felt tears prick her eyes. "When did you get so wise?" "Around the time my heart tried to kill me at 40,000 feet. Near-death experiences give you perspective." He paused. "You're going to do great tomorrow. You're going to lead that strike package like you were born for it, because you were. And when you graduate and get that patch, I'm going to be so proud of you I'll probably cry, and then I'll deny it happened. I'll get photographic evidence. You do that." She could hear the smile in his voice. "Now get some sleep, Captain. You've got a war to win tomorrow." Maya slept better than she had in weeks, Jake's words echoing in her mind. She woke at 0400, dressed in the darkness, and headed to the mission planning room where her strike package was already gathering. 16 pilots, 16 WSOs, all of them looking to her for leadership. She stood at the front of the room and briefed the mission. Her voice was steady and confident as she walked through the timeline, the threat picture, the weapons employment plan, the contingencies. She answered questions with precision. She made sure every member of the package understood not just their own role but how they fit into the larger mission. "This is a complex mission against a sophisticated threat," she concluded. "But we've planned for this. We've trained for this. And we're going to execute this flawlessly. Any questions?" There were none. The room was full of professional warriors who knew their jobs and trusted their leader. The flight itself was 3 hours of intense, violent ballet. Maya's strike package faced every threat imaginable, enemy fighters trying to intercept them, surface-to-air missiles launching from hidden sites, jamming that disrupted their communications. They lost 2 aircraft to simulated kills in the first 30 minutes. But Maya adapted. She rerouted the formation to avoid a threat she'd identified at the last moment. She coordinated with the support aircraft, the EA-18 Growlers providing jamming, the E-3 AWACS controlling the battle space, to create windows of opportunity. She made split-second decisions that kept the mission on track. All flights, this is Viper lead. Target in sight, 10 o'clock, 30 miles. Weapons free on my mark. Torres's voice came through on the intercom, calm and professional. Lasers hot, target designated. Ready when you are. 3, 2, 1, mark. The simulated weapons came off the rails in perfect sequence. Through her helmet-mounted display, Maya watched the targeting data track to impact. Direct hit. Mission success. Good kill, good kill. All flights, egress as briefed. Watch for threats during the climb out. They got the entire package home without any additional losses, threading the needle between threat systems that should have killed them, using terrain and tactics and teamwork to survive. The debrief lasted 4 hours. Every decision was analyzed, every mistake catalogued, every success acknowledged. The instructors were thorough and merciless, but at the end, the senior instructor, a lieutenant colonel with more combat hours than most squadrons combined, stood up and looked at Maya. Captain Chen, that was a graduate-level performance. You adapted to a dynamic threat environment, made sound tactical decisions under pressure, and brought your package home. Well done. It was the highest praise possible from the weapons school instructors, and Maya felt something loosen in her chest that had been tight since the day Jake collapsed. She'd proven herself. Not just as a pilot, but as a tactical leader, an instructor in training, someone who could be trusted with the lives of other aviators. The graduation ceremony was held 2 weeks later. Maya's father flew down from Washington for it, along with Colonel Bridges and a contingent from her squadron. But the person she most wanted to see was standing at the back of the auditorium, looking uncomfortable in his dress blues, Jake. He'd flown commercial on his own dime, taking leave time to be there. When Maya spotted him after the ceremony, her newly awarded weapons school patch gleaming on her flight suit, she felt her throat tighten. You came, she said, threading through the crowd to reach him. Did you really think I'd miss this? Jake pulled her into a hug. I'm so proud of you, Maya. You earned this. I couldn't have done it without you. All those months we flew together, everything you taught me about crew coordination and communication, it mattered. It all mattered. I was just along for the ride. You were always this good. They stood there for a moment, the noise of the celebration swirling around them. Then Jake stepped back and looked at her seriously. I have some news. I got accepted to a pilot training instructor position at Shepherd. I'm going to teach the next generation of pilots how not to crash. Jake, that's amazing. It's not flying fighters. It's not what I dreamed of doing. But it's still aviation, and it's still making a difference. He smiled, and this time it reached his eyes. I think I'm going to be okay, Maya. It took me a while to get there, but I'm going to be okay. Maya felt relief wash over her. She'd been so worried about him, wondering if he'd ever find peace with what happened. Hearing that he'd found a path forward, a way to stay connected to aviation even if he couldn't fly fighters anymore, meant everything. When do you start? Next month. So I guess this is goodbye for a while. You're heading back to Alaska, I'm heading to Texas. He pulled an envelope from his pocket. But before you go, I wanted to give you this. Don't open it until you're back at Elmendorf. Maya took the envelope, feeling something small and hard inside. What is it? You'll see. Just promise you won't open it until you're home. I promise. They said their goodbyes, and Maya flew back to Alaska the next day with Torres, both of them wearing their new weapons school patches with quiet pride. The squadron threw them a welcome-back party, complete with terrible cake and worse speeches. Maya smiled and laughed and accepted congratulations, but part of her mind was on the envelope in her flight bag. That night, alone in her apartment, she finally opened it. Inside was a small pin, a WSO Wings insignia, and a handwritten note on Jake's familiar scrawled handwriting. Maya. These are my wings. I don't need them anymore, but I wanted you to have them. Not as a reminder of what I lost, but as a reminder of what we built together. You're an incredible pilot, but you're an even better person. You never gave up on me, even when I was ready to give up on myself. The best crews aren't just people who fly well together. They're people who make each other better on the ground too. You made me better, Maya. You still do. Whatever aircraft you fly, whatever missions you lead, remember that you don't fly alone. You carry all of us with you, every crew member who trusted you, every student you'll teach, every life you'll save by sharing what you've learned. Keep being extraordinary. And maybe someday, when you're teaching the next generation of fighter pilots, tell them about the WSO who believed in you before you believed in yourself. Your friend always, Jake. Maya sat on her couch, the wings clutched in her hand, tears streaming down her face. She'd spent months feeling guilty about moving forward while Jake was stuck. But he'd never been stuck. He'd been finding his own way forward, and somehow, in the process, he'd helped her do the same. She put the wings on her bookshelf, next to a photo of her and Jake in front of their F-15, taken on a bright summer day before everything changed. Two warriors in flight suits, smiling at the camera, completely unaware that their partnership was about to be tested in ways they couldn't imagine. But they'd survived it. Not unchanged, but stronger for it. The next morning, Maya reported to Colonel Bridges' office. The colonel looked up from her paperwork and smiled. "How does it feel to be back, Captain Chen?" "Good, ma'am. Really good." "Excellent. Because I have your first assignment as a weapons school graduate." Bridges slid a folder across the desk. "We're standing up a new training program for combined fighter operations with our NATO allies. You'll be leading the curriculum development and flying as the demonstration pilot." Maya opened the folder and scanned the first page. It was exactly the kind of high-visibility, high-impact assignment that could make a career. "There's more," Colonel Bridges continued. "The Air Force is also looking at you for a test pilot position at Edwards. That's down the road a bit, you'd need at least another year of operational experience first. But they've flagged you as a candidate. Test pilot school." It was another dream milestone, the kind of assignment that led to astronaut selection, to breaking barriers and pushing the envelope of what was possible. Maya had never dared to imagine she might be considered for something like that. "I don't know what to say, ma'am." "Say yes to the NATO program, and we'll worry about Edwards when the time comes." Bridges leaned back in her chair. "Maya, what you did bringing Morrison home, then your performance at weapons school, you've proven yourself at every level. The Air Force invests in officers who can handle pressure and lead others. That's you." Maya thought about Jake's note, about carrying others with her. "I want to do this, but I want to make sure I'm giving back too. Training the next generation, being a mentor, that matters to me." "It should. And you'll have plenty of opportunities for that. Part of this NATO program involves instructing Allied pilots. You'll be shaping how multiple air forces think about combined operations." The colonel smiled. "Plus, I'm assigning you two new responsibilities here at the squadron. First, you're taking over as the weapons and tactics officer. Second, you'll be mentoring our junior pilots, specifically the women coming up through the ranks who need to see what's possible." That last part hit home. Maya remembered being a lieutenant, one of only 3 women in her pilot training class, facing instructors who didn't think women belonged in fighters. She remembered the subtle and not-so-subtle discrimination, the constant need to prove herself, the loneliness of being different in a community that valued conformity. If she could make that path easier for the women coming after her, it would mean everything. "When do I start?" "Next week. Torres will be your assistant weapons officer. She's staying on as your WSO for now, though she'll eventually need to move on to her own aircraft commander position. But for the next year, you two are a team." Over the next 6 months, Maya threw herself into the work with the same intensity she'd brought to weapons school. She developed training syllabi, flew demonstration missions for Allied pilots, and spent hours mentoring the squadron's junior officers. She learned that teaching was its own kind of flying, harder in some ways, more rewarding in others. The NATO program brought pilots from 6 different countries to Elmendorf for intensive training in combined operations. Maya led from the front, flying the most challenging missions and demonstrating the tactics she'd learned at weapons school. But she also made sure to listen, to learn from the different perspectives and approaches the Allied pilots brought with them. One evening after a particularly complex training mission, Maya was debriefing with a German pilot, a woman named Hauptmann, Captain Schneider, who flew Eurofighter Typhoons. They were reviewing the mission tape when Schneider paused it. "That decision you made there," she said, pointing at the screen. "Where you split the formation to bracket the threat. We don't teach that in the Luftwaffe. It's brilliant, but it requires the flight lead to trust their wingman completely." "Trust is everything," Maya said. "Without it, you're just 4 aircraft flying in the same piece of sky. With it, you're a weapons system that's greater than the sum of its parts." "Did you learn that at your weapons school?" "No. I learned it from my WSO." Maya thought of Jake, wondered how he was doing at Shepherd, training the next generation of pilots. They texted occasionally, but both of them were too busy for long conversations. "He taught me that the best crews make each other better. That lesson stuck with me." Schneider nodded thoughtfully. "In Germany, we have a saying, gemeinsam sind wir stark. Together we are strong. I think your WSO understood this." The NATO program was deemed a massive success, and Maya received a commendation from the commander of U.S. Air Forces in Europe. But more importantly, she received emails and messages from the pilots who'd gone through the training, telling her how it had changed their approach to flying, how it had made them better officers. That's when Maya realized that her impact wasn't just measured in successful missions or awards. It was measured in the pilots she'd trained, the lives she'd potentially saved by sharing what she knew, the culture she was helping to shape by being visible as a woman in a position of leadership. 1 year after returning from weapons school, Maya got a call from Jake. He was in high spirits, talking excitedly about his students at Shepherd. "You won't believe this," he said. "I just had a student solo for the first time, a young woman who reminded me so much of you it was scary. Same determination, same refusal to accept limitations. She's going to be incredible." "Did you tell her about your fighter days?" "I did. Told her about flying with the best pilot I ever knew, and how she never gave up even when things got hard." He paused. "I told her about the day you saved my life, Maya. I wanted her to understand what real leadership looks like." Maya felt her eyes burn. "Jake. I mean it. I've had time to process everything, and I've realized something. Yeah, I lost my flying career. That still hurts. But I gained something too, perspective. Purpose. The chance to shape the next generation from the ground up. It's different than I planned, but it's not less important." "I'm really glad you're okay," Maya said quietly. "More than okay. I'm happy, Maya. For the first time since the accident, I'm actually happy." They talked for another hour, catching up on everything they'd missed in each other's lives. When they finally hung up, Maya felt a sense of peace she hadn't realized she'd been missing. 2 years after the incident that changed everything, Maya found herself back at 40,000 feet, leading a 4-ship formation over the Pacific. But this time, everything was different. She was a major now, with captain's bars traded for gold oak leaves. Torres had moved on to her own aircraft commander position, and Maya was flying with a new WSO, a sharp young lieutenant fresh from training. But this wasn't a routine training flight. This was a real-world scramble. Viper flight, Elmendorf control. "We have multiple unidentified aircraft approaching Alaskan airspace from the northwest. Scramble, scramble, scramble." The alert had come at 0400, pulling Maya from a dead sleep. 20 minutes later, she was airborne with 3 other F-15s, racing toward a potential international incident. Russian aircraft testing American air defenses wasn't uncommon, but the frequency had increased in recent months, and tensions were high. "Viper lead has radar contact," Maya called, her eyes locked on the targeting display. "For contacts, bearing 320, range 80 miles, altitude 41,000. Viper lead, control. Those are Russian Tu-95 bears with fighter escort. Intercept and identify, but do not engage unless fired upon. ROE is weapons tight. Rules of engagement. Don't shoot unless shot at. Maya acknowledged and adjusted her intercept course. This was the kind of mission that required precision and discipline. Get close enough to identify and escort the Russian aircraft, but not so close that anyone got nervous and did something stupid. All Vipers, combat spread. Let's make this clean. The 4 F-15s spread out into a tactical formation, closing on the Russian bombers at over 1,000 miles per hour. As they got closer, Maya could make out the massive propeller-driven aircraft on her radar, Cold War relics that were still capable platforms, escorted by modern Su-35 fighters. Viper lead is visual with the Bears, Maya called, pulling alongside the lead bomber. Through her canopy, she could see the Russian aircraft clearly, its contra-rotating propellers, the red star on its tail, even the crew inside looking back at her through their windows. She snapped a photograph with her targeting pod, documenting the intercept for intelligence purposes. This close, barely 200 feet separating the two aircraft, she could feel the turbulence from the Bear's massive propellers buffeting her F-15. Viper 2 has the Su-35s, her wingman called. They're being professional. No aggressive maneuvers. For the next 40 minutes, Maya and her flight escorted the Russian formation along the edge of American airspace, a deadly ballet performed at nearly 500 miles per hour. It was a message: we see you, we're watching, don't cross the line. The Russians knew the game, flying as close to the boundary as they could without technically violating it. Finally, the Russian formation turned away, heading back toward their bases in Siberia. Maya maintained her escort position until they were well clear of American airspace, then broke off. Viper flight, Elmendorf control. Good intercept. Return to base. As Maya turned her F-15 back toward Alaska, the sun was rising over the Pacific, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. She thought about how far she'd come, from the terrified pilot trying to save her unconscious WSO, to a confident mission commander leading real-world operations. She thought about Jake, teaching students at Shepherd, shaping the next generation of aviators. She thought about all the women coming up through the ranks who would face their own challenges, their own moments of doubt. She thought about the responsibility that came with success, to mentor, to lead, to make the path easier for those who followed. Ma'am? Her WSO's voice broke through her thoughts. That was incredible. My first real intercept. Maya smiled behind her oxygen mask. Get used to it, Lieutenant. This is what we do. Back at Elmendorf, the debrief was quick and professional. The intercept had gone exactly as planned. No incidents, no provocations, just professional airmanship on both sides. As Maya walked out of the operations building, Colonel Bridges, now a full bird colonel, was waiting for her. Good work up there, Major. Clean intercept, by the book. Thank you, ma'am. Walk with me. They headed toward the flight line, where rows of F-15s sat ready for the next scramble. I got a call from Edwards yesterday. They want you for the next test pilot class. It starts in 6 months. There it was. The opportunity Maya had been working toward for years, the chance to push the boundaries of what was possible in aviation. She should have felt pure excitement, but instead, she felt something more complex, pride mixed with responsibility, ambition tempered by wisdom. What do you think, ma'am? I think you're ready. More than ready. But I also think you need to decide what kind of career you want. Test pilot school leads to cutting-edge programs, maybe even astronaut selection. But it also takes you away from operational flying, from mentoring junior officers, from the direct impact you're having here. Maya looked out at the flight line, at the aircraft that represented everything she loved about this job. Then she thought about the lieutenants she was mentoring, the Allied pilots she was training, the impact she could have by staying where she was and continuing to teach. Can I think about it? Take your time. The Air Force will still be here when you decide. That evening, Maya called Jake. He answered on the second ring, and she could hear the sounds of a flight line in the background. He was probably between training sorties. Hey, stranger, he said warmly. To what do I owe this honor? I need advice. They offered me test pilot school. Maya, that's amazing. When do you start? That's the thing. I'm not sure I want to accept. Jake was quiet for a moment. Tell me why. Maya explained her reservations, the pull between advancing her own career and continuing to mentor others, between exploring new frontiers and solidifying the gains women had made in fighters. When she finished, Jake let out a low whistle. That's a tough call. What does your gut tell you? My gut says there's more work to do here. That the Air Force needs experienced women in operational squadrons, showing junior officers what's possible. That I can have a bigger impact teaching than I can test flying. Then you have your answer. But test pilot school. We'll still be there in a few years if you change your mind. But those lieutenants you're mentoring? They need you now. The culture you're helping to change? That needs you now. Jake's voice was firm. You've always been about the mission first, Maya. What's the mission right now? She knew the answer before she'd even called him. Building the next generation. There you go. They talked for another hour, catching up on life and careers and all the small details that made up their days. Before they hung up, Jake said, "Hey, Maya. I'm proud of you. Not because of the awards or the career opportunities. But because you're still the same person who refused to give up on me when my heart gave out at 40,000 feet. You're still all about the crew." Always, Maya said softly. Always about the crew. The next morning, Maya walked into Colonel Bridges's office and declined the test pilot school offer. Instead, she requested to stay at Elmendorf, to continue building the training programs, to keep mentoring junior officers. The colonel smiled like she'd been expecting that answer all along. The Air Force needs officers like you, Maya. Officers who understand that leadership isn't just about personal achievement, it's about building something bigger than yourself. 6 months later, Maya was promoted to lieutenant colonel and given command of the training squadron. On her first day, she assembled all the junior officers and told them a story about a flight at 40,000 feet, a WSO who collapsed, and the decisions that had to be made in the moments that followed. Leadership isn't about being perfect, she told them. It's about making the best decision you can with the information you have, and then living with the consequences. It's about trusting your crew and being worthy of their trust. It's about understanding that sometimes the greatest act of courage is admitting you're scared and doing the job anyway. She looked out at the faces watching her, young pilots and WSOs, men and women, all of them at the beginning of their journeys. Some would go on to great things. Some would face setbacks and challenges. Some would have their dreams redirected by circumstances beyond their control. But all of them deserved a leader who would fight for them, mentor them, and show them what was possible. The call sign they gave me after that incident was Guardian, Maya said. Because I brought my WSO home when everything went wrong. But here's what I learned, we're all guardians. Every time we fly, every time we lead, every time we mentor someone junior to us, we're guarding something precious. The mission. The crew. The future of this service. She paused, letting the words sink in. So that's what we're going to do here. We're going to train the best fighter pilots and WSOs in the world. We're going to build crews that trust each other absolutely. And we're going to make sure that when the next emergency happens at 40,000 feet, the person in that cockpit has the skills, the confidence, and the support they need to bring everyone home. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell, so you don't miss any upload from us.